Hi, my name is Gokul Narayan. I'm the average Joe on this show. I'm an expert in the field of information technology and riding bikes. Obviously, both of these talents are irrelevant for the purpose of this channel. And Aditya, as usual, is our a resident expert. Hi, Aditya. Thank
Hey
you so
Gokul.
much for sharing with us your wisdom and knowledge. I feel like that Master Shifu kind of like I'm like Poe who's coming down to Master Shifu, and yeah, you get the gist. So Aditya, cut the chase. We were discussing savings,
Mm.
and you said quite a few interesting things with respect to how I should be saving and how much I should be saving, considering the fact that I got onto this train very late in life. You've been rather suggesting that I save rather aggressively. So I thought, why not make a video on savings and how people should save and what should be the thumb rule? And maybe we can have a discussion about that. Let's say there are individuals who are far more conscientious than I was about building and generating wealth and revenue. So let's take an average thumb rule that if there is one that could be called with respect to savings, what would it be? What would you say is an average thumb rule?
So basically, Gokul, I think there are three ways in which you can go about deciding how much to save each month, because I think that's the question that everyone struggles with.
All
Okay,
right.
so
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
get some money coming to my bank account. That could be salary, it could be self-employment, it could be whatever, pension. You never know what type of money is coming, but something's coming in. But then how much of that should you, let's say, spend on yourself, and how much of that should you, yourself or your family or whatever it is, and how much should you save or invest? So the first is to just have a certain percentage in mind of your gross income. And the usual
Okay.
rule is, you should save at least minimal 10% of your gross income. That's your
Okay.
pre-tax income. Right? So let's say if
Okay.
you earn 50,000 rupees a month, then you want to save 5,000 every month without fail. That's a basic ground rule that's just meant to be applied so that you don't end up not saving anything. Right? So that
Correct. Correct.
something's going into your savings every month, regardless of how much you're earning.
Okay.
The other way is to think of it as, I'll save whatever I have left after my expenses are done for the month. So, for
Okay.
instance, if you
Okay.
bring in 50,000 a month and your monthly expenses are 25,000, that leaves 25,000 for you, right? So you'll say, okay, so if I'm able to, then I'll save 25,000 because that's what I have remaining after my expenses are taken care of,
Okay.
right? So in that case, it would vary, and there's no general rule. Um, the third way is a more exact way, which is you calculate, and it's a series of calculations based on how much you want to save by the time you retire. So let's
Okay.
assume that you're saving in order to build up investments that you're going to live
Okay.
off of in retirement.
Yeah.
Then you need to know how much you're going to need in retirement. And that's a
Okay.
calculation that we need to do based on our expenses today. In retirement, you'd maybe spend 70 to 80% of what you're spending today because your responsibilities are less, etc. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So then based on that 70 or 80% factor of your current expenses, there are some calculations you can do to project how much you'd need to spend per month in retirement. Then once you have that number in mind, you then calculate, okay, so if I need X amount per month in retirement, then what's the capital I need to generate that amount at that time?
And that sounds like a very tedious approach to the
Yeah.
goal-based approach. Basically, seems a lot more involves a lot more planning and calculation and all of that.
Yes, it does. It does. So generally, for people starting out, and because a lot of people who watch these sorts of videos are 20s, early 30s. Generally, for people starting out, they usually start off either with I'll save what I can approach, which is not the ideal, but or they start off with a general 10% rule, right? But
So,
that works for someone
Aditya,
who's young.
yeah, a save what you can kind of approach. I think is okay for people who are who very conscious about saving and the fact that they have to save. Save what you can approach doesn't work for the live in the moment carpe diem kind of crowd.
Mm, like you.
Because then it's more about instant gratification and less about planning and looking at the future and
Yeah.
what it entails.
Yeah.
And therefore, I think before one chooses which style of saving should be would work best for a particular person, I think what we should look at is what our spending habits are and what our propensity to save is, and how generally do we respond to money in the pocket. So if I'm presuming if you're the kind of person who sees money in the wallet and has this urge to spend,
Mm.
and then automatically there are things that come up
Yeah.
which then disguise themselves from wants into needs, you're not the kind of person who should be going down the save what you can route. You should rather just have a thumb rule and say, I need to put this amount aside, and then we can then figure out what else to do. I mean, does that
Yeah,
make sense?
it does. So I think the easiest route, Gokul, for someone who doesn't want to do all the mathematics right now, is to go with the general percentage rule. So,
Yeah.
which is, if you're someone who's impulsive, who loves to live in the moment, carpe diem type, and you're not going to save, then you need to automate it. And if you're starting off with, if you're 20 something, starting off with that 10% rule, that means I'm going to save 10% of gross income, then that needs to be automated so that it goes from your bank account every month. So you don't realize it and you don't miss it.
Correct.
And this is most easily done through an SIP, but that's a different subject. Um, but that 10% rule, Gokul, applies if you start off really early. Let's say you're 20, 25, maybe even
Exactly.
28.
That's what I was about to say.
Yeah. But once you get to, a little older, especially once you get 40 and beyond, then 10% is not going to cut it. It's not going to be enough to generate enough of capital for you to live off of in retirement. Now,
Right.
if you happen to be someone who's lucky enough, I don't know anybody who's going to get a pension in retirement, then that's great. Then maybe you don't need to worry so much. But if you're not getting an amazing pension, then the amount that you save increases a lot the older you start the process. So if you start the
Yeah.
process at 40 rather than 25, then instead of 10%, you probably will have to save 40% of your income, not just 10.
Yeah. So, Aditya, very interesting point that you make, because I recently read a book. It's Let's Talk Money by this lady called Monica Halan. I think
Yeah.
she was one of the editors of the Mint.
Mm.
And she's proposed a very similar kind of thing that you're talking about, where she says, considering the fact that you've got nothing saved up, save proportionate to your age. So if you're 25, save 25%. If you've got nothing saved up, and she's not talking about it from a goal approach. She's just basically talking about financial health.
Right.
So if you're 40 and you've got nothing saved up, save 40% of your income. What do you think about that kind of an
Yeah,
approach?
Gokul, that was really nice, and you shared it with me, and I went through the sections, and I think that's a good rule of thumb for people to follow. It also really drives home the point that if you don't start early enough, you're going to really struggle to get your savings in place later on. So her rule is, just basically, so if you're 30, then you need to save 30% of your post-tax income, not even pre-tax. So
Okay.
post-tax
Yeah.
income, right? So that makes it a little better. Then if you're 40, you need to save 40%. But keep in mind, Gokul, she said that's if you're starting with zero. Usually people
Yeah.
at 35 will have something. It could be that you had saved up a little bit when you started working and then lost your way in the middle. It could be that you've been making ATC investments every year. You didn't know what they were, and now you realize, oh, that's an investment as well. So if you're
Correct.
35 and you've been making ATC investments for 10 years, then you've got a chunk in lying somewhere. Either it's in an FD or it's
So
in a ULIP or in mutual fund.
could also be a PPF or an EPF kind of
Yeah,
saving that you have.
yeah. Because
So yeah,
if
yeah.
if you're an employee in a largish sort of firm, then you've been forced to make savings through an EPF, and you don't know it, but it's there. So consider that also as part of your the chunk that you're starting with.
So what we're basically suggesting is saving um, as a force of habit is a very good system to inculcate. How much you save and how aggressively you save will depend upon what your goals are. The problem that I see with most people and planning for retirement is at the age of 20 or 30 or even approaching 40, retirement just seems like such a far cry that people don't take it seriously enough.
Mm.
I mean, I wish I'd taken it more seriously when I was in my 20s and
Yeah.
in my early 30s of having looked at the concept of retirement or concept of building a corpus. Forget retirement. I'm just building a corpus so that I'm not constantly worried about how much income I generate and bring in to the bank every month.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That kind of financial security is something that I think a lot of people need to inculcate, and therefore saving. That's why I like that first rule. Start off with a 10% and then save as aggressively as you can after 10%. 10%, there is no question about it.
Yeah.
But then over a bare minimum, the 10% has to go out. Figure out what you need to cut out in your in your expenses so that you make sure that 10% is done. But then try and be as aggressive with your saving as possible to make sure that your corpus gets built up. But this is newly acquired wisdom. I'm not saying that I've always had this, and I've always been very super aggressive about saving. It's just.
And Gokul, there's this school of thought these days that young people should invest in themselves rather than invest when they're young. So let's say 20 somethings, right? And I've watched a couple of videos. I remember one video of Gaurav Kapoor. Gaurav Kapoor, the broadcaster. Yeah. So I'm a fan of Gaurav Kapoor. So I was watching.
He speaks really well, and he's a funny guy.
Yeah. So I was watching one of his videos, and he's a proponent of that when you're 20 something, don't worry about saving, but invest in yourself. That means your own growth, which will help you later on in your career advancements and other things. 20 somethings really find that attractive. And so I was interested in knowing what your thoughts are on
that. I've always believed that a certain sum of your income generated should constantly be invested in yourself. And it's not about 20s. I don't believe that it's 20s because I still do courses all the time.
Yeah.
Whether it's with respect to finance, whether it's with respect to marketing, whether it's with respect to law, it's something that I think is a constant part of life. I wouldn't suggest anybody to stop learning at any point of time. So there should be, you can be more career-based learning when you're younger and more interest-based learning when you go on, and so on and so forth. But it should continue. It's not something that you should give up on. I mean, and unlike what God is saying, I don't think it should be restricted to your 20s.
No, I don't think he means it should be restricted, because he's quite clear that it should not be restricted. It's like lifelong.
Okay.
But his point was that don't worry about saving, investing, etc. when you're starting out in your 20s. And his point was because how much are you going to save? You're not going to end up saving much because you start off earning less. And then by the time, if you invest more in yourself, by the time you're in your 30s and your career really takes off, then what you invested will seem really small and insignificant. But I sort of disagree with what he's saying, because a couple of reasons. One is I feel that at least that 10%, like that minimal 10%, needs to go automated without you even realizing that it's gone. And then above that, you should be spending on yourself and investing in yourself. So I think that 10% is non-negotiable, because a couple of things, life doesn't work out the same for everybody. So not everybody's career is going to take off when they hit 30 or whatever it is. You go through ups and downs. And the more complicated life gets, we go through more ups and downs. So you can't really say that it's going to take off or not take off and when it will take off.
Another point, Aditya, which is very important, is the fact that I cannot emphasize the.
No, I was going to say it forms a habit. Which you are very adamant about.
Yeah, I think that the sooner you can create a habit of saving, the easier you will find it to develop all financial health. It's a matter of making a habit. If you're not in the habit in your 20s, you're going to struggle in your 30s to create a habit out of that, because it's an attitude that we're talking about. If it's an attitude that you have, then automatically you're prioritizing wealth accumulation. So therefore, these two concepts together, I think, make a lot of sense. Bare minimum 10%, make saving a habit, and then invest whatever you want to in yourself.
Yeah. And I think, Gokul, the fact that you end up saving small amounts of money makes it also, you don't feel that bad if you lose some money and make some bad decisions. And so you also learn about it while you're in your 20s and starting out.
Correct.